Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I feel like we've all got that one series that's always been on the periphery, but which you've never really given much thought to. And, well, okay, so I have quite a few series that fit that bill, but for me, the big one was always Skip Beat. For as long as I've been reading manga, anytime I would go into the bookstore, there would always be at least one volume of Skip Beat on the shelf. This became even more noticeable as the years passed and I saw other series come and go, but it only really struck me a few months ago that, though it was a familiar title, I didn't actually have any idea what it was about. Somewhere along the way, I'd mentally crossed it off as just another generic shoujo romance, so when I did finally look into it, I was surprised to find that it actually sounded kind of great. The manga is actually still ongoing, and has been for nearly 20 years since its start in 2002. I haven't heard of any plans to end it soon, but even if there were, I knew I didn't have it in me to commit to anything that long just now, so I decided to watch the anime adaptation instead, and though I don't plan to go into too many specifics, there will be some spoilers. Skip Beat is the story of Kyoko Mogami. She's only 16, but she works day and night to afford her apartment in Tokyo. She moved to the city right after middle school with her childhood friend Shotaro. Sho dreams of being famous and successful, and he does already seem to be doing pretty well for himself at the time our story starts. He's got no shortage of fangirls, at least. Anyway, in the beginning, Kyoko is very easygoing and upbeat. She's a bit of a romantic and loves the idea of fairy tales and magic spells. She's very positive about her less than glamorous life, stating that even if she can never be a princess herself, at least she gets to live happily with her prince. But as you've probably already guessed, that's not the case for long. The day Skip Beat opens up on is kind of a special occasion, because Sho's coming home, at least for one night, which should have been the first red flag, that he hardly even visits this overpriced city apartment that Kyoko's working herself ragged to keep. She spends their limited time together waiting on him hand and foot, and he barely says a word to her. Sho's character is pretty clear from the moment he's introduced. Kyoko's not the only one who thinks he's a prince. He's extremely self-centered and in love with his own image. Their relationship as old friends is a crucial part of this story, and so we're treated to a healthy dose of flashbacks starting with the very first episode, which allows the audience to see that Sho was always this way. I'd kind of hoped to find something redeeming about him in their shared history, that maybe he used to be more down to earth until the fame went to his head, but we're never given any indication of that. Apparently, Sho was always the most popular boy in their small town, and wasn't at all shy about telling his parents that he was too good for a future spent taking over the family inn. And it was all too easy to convince Kyoko to join him. Though, to her credit, the flashbacks do also give us an inkling, very early on, of how she may have come to be so emotionally dependent on him. For a while, she was literally dependent on his parents. Unfortunately, the anime never goes into the whole story, but her father's not around, and her mother left when she was young. I'd say she looks about 9 or 10 in the flashback. Sho's family took her in, and that connection made all Sho's admirers jealous, so Kyoko's never really had any other friends. With that sort of isolation, seemingly favored by the boy everyone wanted to be with, I could see how she could get swept up by that. But it all comes to an end when she goes to surprise him at the studio the next day, and walks in on him mocking her to his manager. She realizes that her prince sees her as nothing more than a glorified maid, and, by his account, not even one pretty enough to pretend to be interested in. And when Kyoko snaps, it was just as satisfying as I'd hoped. Even with her early positivity, she always had a penchant for being over the top. Her reactions can be very dramatic. She storms in, tells Sho it's over, and swears she'll get revenge, which comes in the form of Kyoko dedicating herself to getting into showbiz and becoming more successful than he is. And I know we're still barely into the story at this point, and there's a lot I've stopped to comment on already, but there's just so much that I loved about this show, starting from the very first episode. I loved Kyoko as our main protagonist. She was a ton of fun to watch in her crazier moments, but also really easy to connect with during her lower, more down-to-earth moments, and I think it was adapted into an anime at just the right time. I mean, I'm sure there are examples of it in newer anime also, but it's got a lot of those figurative, cartoony, almost fourth wall breaking visual storytelling moments that I tend to associate with that mid-2000s era of anime, and which suit Kyoko perfectly. All throughout this first day, whenever she was confronted with some aspect of her life that was hard or disappointing, we'd see these mental angels pop up around her shoulders, reminding her that as long as her struggle helped show in some way, it was all worth it. When she ends things with him, she literally grabs those angels out of the air and smacks him across the face with them. It's just little visuals like that sum up the whole scene and all the emotions behind it without even needing any words. Skip Beat is full of moments like that, and I love it. Skip Beat could be a very fun show. That's what really drew me to it when I first read the summary. I think we can all enjoy a good petty revenge story every once in a while. But at the same time, there was rarely an episode where it didn't get emotional and a little dark, too. Even while Kyoko's rage is building and she's getting ready to go off on show, there's a moment where she reflects on their time together, and I at least got the impression that she knew things had gone irretrievably downhill. She'd really been holding on to this idea of a Cinderella story, that all her suffering was for something, and her desperation to hold on to this happy ending she had planned for herself hit me a lot harder than I'd expected. And it just goes from there. Kyoko goes to the rival talent agency to begin this new journey, even though she clearly hasn't thought this through, and basically intimidates the talent agent into letting her join the next group auditioning, which she doesn't pass, though she does stand out enough to catch the company president's eye. He decides to create an entirely new section of the agency for people like her, people with potential, but who are missing one crucial thing. And for Kyoko, it's love, which always felt like a really broad way of describing it to me. Personally, I took it to mean that she's lost her ability to trust others since Sho's betrayal. Her outlook on life has become a lot darker, and she's just generally suspicious of people now. She's no longer in a position where she can open up to people, or where others will open up to her, but it's described as having to learn to love and be loved by others. Basically, she's assigned a bunch of odd jobs and grunt work, helping out the real stars wherever she can. It just never stopped being striking to me, how this show could keep going from one extreme to the other and still feel balanced, because the audition and her road to getting there were a ton of fun, and it's immediately followed up by Kyoko being forced to reflect on her own shortcomings, how much Sho actually hurt her, a lot of which are things that won't be solved by hurting him in return. Every 3 or 4 episodes are their own little arcs, showcasing one of Kyoko's many adventures in this new life, and I could honestly gush about every single one of them. I won't, because we'd be here forever, and I'd be making a lot of the same points over and over again, but her first big job especially stood out to me. She's tasked with being this rising star's personal assistant on her first movie shoot, except the girl's a total diva, and the president's secretly hoping she'll learn as much from the experience as Kyoko. But Kyoko's surprisingly taken with her. Ruriko seems like a fairy tale princess to her, and she's actually more than willing to help her any way she can. This one had 2 parts for me. The first was seeing the first person Kyoko trusted again abuse that kindness, and later, when things aren't going her way, Ruriko refuses to do her scenes, and Kyoko's given the chance to step in and play her part instead. The short version is that the scene depicts her character conducting a tea ceremony, something Kyoko has real experience with from her time with Sho's family. His mother was training her in that art, and this whole thing should have been a really good moment for her. The director's actually more interested in motivating Ruriko than replacing her, but for her first acting experience ever, she's doing really well. But in the midst of all this, she realizes something. Only the inn's owner has the right to preside over a tea ceremony. Kyoko really has been trying to better herself and find some good in the world again. Her time with Sho's parents has been the one thing she's been holding on to as a selfless act she can personally relate to. Now she realizes that they didn't take her in out of the goodness of their hearts. They were grooming her to be the ideal wife for their son. I already really liked Kyoko and wanted to see her succeed. It was like every time she started to get ahead, there was something right around the corner to bring her back down. This show was just as cynical as it was uplifting. But what really got to me was that those emotional pitfalls hit their mark every single time. After a while, I can usually predict them, and that really wasn't the case here. I experienced Kyoko's ups and downs just as she did, and I eventually just let myself be along for the ride. There are series that make you think, and series that make you feel, but those don't always go hand in hand. Skip Beat was one of those shows that engaged both sides of me from start to finish. Any of you who are familiar with the series will know that I've just barely scratched the surface here, even just of what the anime covers. There are a ton of minor characters, each with their own story and struggles, who all have their own lessons to teach Kyoko as she navigates the show business world. Another girl is assigned to the section Kyoko's in, and I loved seeing her joy at making her first real friend. Kyoko starts attending a performing arts school, which is a huge step in taking her life back as she gave up high school to support Sho. And the big one, of course. Ren Saruga is the agency's star. Sho considered him a rival and hated him for being more popular and successful than he was, but he's a complicated character too. Generally very polite, but extremely serious about his work. He and Kyoko get off on the wrong foot. He's very disapproving of her revenge plot. But of course they start to spend more time together through their various jobs, and we start to see that he's got his own emotional deficiencies, and her success has brought her back into contact with Sho quite a few times too, and a love triangle was just about to form around the time the anime leaves off. I loved what I saw, but to be honest, Skip Beat wasn't everything I'd wanted it to be. Obviously, given what I'd researched about the manga, I knew it was really just the first chapter to a much bigger story, but it feels incomplete. Like, even that last little plot felt like it really could have used one more episode to tie everything together. And I'd been optimistic this wouldn't be the case. I mean, Kyoko's dream is pretty vague. I thought it was plausible the anime could give its viewers a feel for the series and stand alone as its own thing. If anything, though, it gave me just enough of a taste to now definitely make me go read the manga someday. There's just too much I still need answers to. As far as they've come, all the characters feel like they've got so much room to grow. Ren was just getting his first serious character development when the anime ended. Kanai's past has been hinted at, but barely explored. I'm not so sure he'll be redeemed, but it was definitely starting to look like there was more to show. And then there's Kyoko's backstory, of course. There's nothing more personally geared towards me than troubled, absent mothers. I loved what these 25 episodes had to offer, but I have to admit that the anime kind of just drops off. I didn't get any sense of closure at the end, and it's definitely not intended to stand alone. On top of the last little arc's conclusion feeling rushed, the opening and ending suddenly change 5 episodes from the end. It really made me wonder if they'd been expecting to get renewed for a second season that just never happened. With this in mind, it makes it a little harder to recommend. Obviously, I would hope that anyone who looks into a series based on my recommendation would also enjoy it, but in cases like this one, it's asking for quite the time commitment. I know the manga passed volume 40 a while back. One that I'm not prepared to make yet myself. But I guess the catch is that I know I definitely will be reading the rest of Skip Beat someday. The story and emotions were just too good, the characters just starting to get some real depth. If it sounds interesting and you're up for the journey, or if you have an easier time walking away from things than I do, then I definitely suggest looking into this one. I'm not surprised Skip Beat has been doing so well for so long. So I'm gonna go immerse myself in one of the 100 other series that pass me by. Hopefully that dulls the urge to spend every waking minute continuing this one. Thank you for watching.